There are crimes every day across the globe.
911, what's your emergency?
Murders, homicides, burglaries, robberies, assaults, and so much more. Here, we will be telling you the true stories about those involved in homicides, murders, burglaries, robberies, heists, and many more crimes. So sit back, try to relax, and let's get into the show. This is Chilling Ice Cold Crime. Hello, 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 and happy October. It is officially October for all of you guys out there. And I know this month is a very good month because for all you like chillin' crime freaks, because October is of course the creepy month, and I will have a good many episodes hopefully on the way this month, as long as like time doesn't fly off of me. But I'm gonna include some fun little even though this is crime, I'm gonna include some little like more like creepy Halloween stories. Some I'll let you know if they're not real or not. But to begin our episode today, I have a story here. And it is actually a new story. Now, it is actually really real, definitely. And it is a Florida sheriff, and he is solving a 30-year-old cold case murder. And this was just updated 11 hours ago. Now, this is on the new this app called Medium. And this was a book author by Verity Partington, but it's a real story. And the title is Florida Sheriffs Solve 30-Year-Old Cold Case Murder. Proof as to who committed the strangulation killing of Rosalind Cruz in 1993 could not be obtained until now. Authorities in Florida have announced they will finally be able to close a cold case murder dating back to 1993 after DNA provided a link to a long-term suspect. Rosalind Cruz was just 23 and had last been seen getting into the car of an unknown person on November 1st, 1993. Her body was discovered shortly afterwards on the shoulder of East Bay Road in Gibsonton, Florida, with an autopsy subsequently revealing that she had been strangled to death. It seemed investigators were swiftly making progress when the car was traced to a home in Tampa, and a man named Michael Rizzo admitted to picking Rosalind up in his vehicle on the day she died, although he insisted she was alive when he left her. Frustratingly, though, there was nothing concrete to tie Rizzo to the victim, even though his home was within a mile from the deposition site. His girlfriend gave a conflicting story to his alibi, and he failed a polygraph examination. Ultimately, despite all circumstantial evidence, detectives were unable to prove their suspicions, and the case slowly went cold. However, in 2021, special investigators revisited the murder to conduct a meticulous review of the evidence in the light of new scientific breakthroughs. They obtained a DNA sample from Rizzo's daughter, and it was found to be a match to one taken from Rosalind's body nearly 30 years earlier. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office said it is satisfied that Michael Rizzo was the person who murdered Rosalind Cruz, and that the case can at last be finally closed. What cannot be delivered, however, is true justice. Rizzo died in Orange County in 2011 without ever admitting to his crime. Nevertheless, representatives from HISCO were able to visit Rosalind's family to deliver the news face-to-face. They finally had the answers they had waited so long for. Sheriff Chad Krosner said, "We extend our deepest condolences to Miss Cruz's family, and we hope the resolution of this case can provide them some closure. This investigation demonstrates the commitment of our cold case investigators to bring justice to victims and their families, no matter how much time has passed." Wow. That's just kind of crazy. Wow. Well, anywho, yeah. So he got away with the crime. I'm sure that happens a lot. I watch the first 48 a lot. I'm really into like true crime, and I think back to these shows and episodes, and I think to myself, how many times has someone actually murdered someone and has gotten away with it and never been even caught? And I'm like, it probably happens more than when we realize. Definitely. Um, so next up, we have a story which is titled Mary Bell. Now, she is the 11-year-old serial killer. Can you imagine being murdered by an 11-year-old? Anyway, in Britain in 1968, 11-year-old Mary Bell strangled two young boys in the span of 2 months. Bell came from a broken home with a teenage sex worker for a mother and an active criminal for a father. When she and her accomplice, Norma Bell, with no relation, were arrested by police not long after the second murder, Mary reportedly replied, "That's all right by me." During the trial, Norma appeared distraught. Mary, on the other hand, was said to have been defiant, showing zero remorse. Court psychiatrists described her as intelligent, manipulative, and dangerous. Norma was found not guilty, while Mary was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. She served 12 years, briefly escaping prison at one point, and was granted anonymity and a new name upon her release. She gave birth to a daughter, and it was reported in 2009 that she became a grandmother. She was released? What? Mary Bell. Mary Bell. So one of her, oh my gosh. Can you imagine though? Like, how old is she right now? When did she die? Born 1957. Yeah, date apprehended August 7th, 1968. That was 55 years ago. And she's still alive in the United Kingdom. She's 66 years old. And she committed her first killing when she was 10 years old. Oh my goodness. Whoa. So she's actually a grandmother right now. What? Mary Bell recalls the trauma. My mother is never going to find Mary Bell recall at a residential school. Huh. Child killer Mary Bell becomes a grandmother at 51, but all I have left is grief, says victim's mother. Goodness. But could you imagine being like, yeah, my grandmother killed people. And like she's out. She's still out. She's out of jail. And she's Britain's youngest female killer. Yeah, it says the jury ruled Bell was suffering from diminished responsibility and therefore was ended up not being guilty of murder. She received life in detention but was released at the age of 23 and given a fresh identity to protect her daughter when she was born 4 years later on May 25th, 1984, 16 years to the day after Martin died. So her new name, Mary Bell, isn't even her real name. Or what is her new name? Maybe no one even knows her new name. This is crazy. So it's like, even though she did these things, which, even if she did have diminished responsibility, we're like protecting a murderer's family? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that one. But she's 66 years old, supposedly. Anyway, that's crazy. Very odd. Next story here is the man who almost got away with murdering his family. John List killed his 3 kids, wife, and mother in 1971 inside their New Jersey mansion. The family was a bit reclusive and List had skipped town following his crime, so the bodies weren't discovered until a month later. Now, List disappeared for 18 years and remarried, but was finally captured with the help of an episode of America's Most Wanted. He claimed that he had killed his family because they were under crushing debt from the house and medical expenses. A psychiatrist who testified in the trial said the List saw only two choices: go on welfare or send his family to heaven. It was later discovered that the very house that burdened List had a skylight that was rumored to be an original from Tiffany, worth more than enough to make up for any financial strains. It's unclear if List knew of his near priceless treasure. He died serving 5 consecutive life sentences without parole in 2008. What the heck? Who kills their family because they're going poor? Oh my gosh. I just don't get it. Like, I'm going poor. I can't afford to eat, so I'll just kill my family. Who in the world even thinks that? I just don't get it. That's crazy. I don't know. Makes no sense to me. Now, next up today, we have a pretty long story, a long documentary. And it is a true crime story of the search for a vanished hiker on the PCT. A former law enforcement park ranger goes on the trail to find answers after a thru hiker disappears. Now, this article was posted on August 23rd, 2023, and the documentary was created by Andrea Langford. The Southern California stretch of the PCT that sits between Warner Springs and the Anza Trailhead runs 41 desolate miles between 2 rural highways, State Routes 79 and 74. Despite the long views of barren ridges, the meanderings through fields of strange borders, and the occasional funky cactus that isn't the most scenic section, but it was a convenient place for a trail hopeful named Eric Trokman, who lived in nearby Temecula, to test out his equipment for 3 days before he began his PCT through hike for real. On February 20th, 2015, 4 days after the continuous call between Chris and Min, Trokman hiked north from Warner Springs. 18 miles later, his calves feeling sore, he came across something a little peculiar. Another hiker's stuff: a yellow and silver ground pad, a blue sleeping bag, a backpack, a tarp, and a pair of trekking poles was lying next to the trail, as if the owner might return at any moment. Trokman assumed the hiker must be looking out for water or going to the bathroom or trying to find cell service, but in case there was more to it than that, he took the picture of the gear with his phone. The phone recorded the time and date of this fateful encounter, February 20th, 2015 at 2:15 p.m. So he got that picture of that gear. After he got home, Trokman logged online and clicked his way to the PCT class of 2015, a Facebook group of about 3,000 members that consisted of that year's thru hikers and their fans. Trokman had posted a handful of tips in the past, even advising fellow hikers that loose stuff in the pack is annoying. Get more Ziplocs, stuff sacks. But he learned as much from the group as he shared with them. On the 25th, however, Trokman read an unsettling post that reminded him of the abandoned gear he had seen a few days earlier. A 2015 PCT hiker had gone missing. The lost man was 28, the same age as Trokman, and he disappeared from the same section Eric had hiked, except Chris Sylvia had walked in it in the opposite direction. Trokman shared his photo of the abandoned gear in the Facebook thread and provided his name and phone number to search and rescue, but no one interviewed him about what he'd seen until this lady called 2 years later. When she first spoke to Trokman over the phone, he told me he felt guilty about this. Perhaps he should have made more of a fuss when he first saw Chris Sylvia's belongings. Hikers find weird stuff all the time. I reassured him, you took a picture, that's more than I might have done, and I'm a former law enforcement officer. A few weeks before I called Trokman, I came across a Reddit post published in February 2017 by Chris Sylvia's oldest sibling. Still haunted by the TV series episode on Sylvia that never aired, I keep tabs on the case and was saddened to see that little progress, if any, had been made in finding the lost hiker. This month, my brother will have been missing for 2 years, is how Joshua Sylvia's introduced a thread he had created on the second anniversary of his brother's disappearance. In an attempt to stir up interest in the case, Joshua made himself available to answer any questions a would-be sleuth might have. Hopefully the chance of him being a John Doe isn't too high. I was able to track down his dental records and DNA was taken from our mom. I winced. That's so heartbreaking. Then, as I scrolled through the entire thread, I came across this comment. It stated, I was contacted not long ago about a pilot that is being put together for A&E about missing hikers. Sylvia's brother informed the Redditors. If all goes according to plan, my mother and I should be getting flown to California this summer. Reading this stirred something in me. Joshua had misplaced his hope for resolution on Hollywood attention, but because I'd been involved in this project's early development, I knew the television producer had since moved on. I surmised that no one had informed the family of this outcome, so a few days later I contacted Joshua to let him know that this show was not happening. Then I called his mother, Nancy Warman, who thanked me for taking an interest in her son's disappearance, and I made that promise to get her some answers. 6 weeks later, however, on November 6, 2017, I was at the Paradise Valley Cafe near Anza, California, waiting for Eric Trockman to join me for breakfast. He arrived looking every bit the part of the veteran PCT through hiker, wearing modern khaki attire, a neatly trimmed beard, and an agreeable disposition. After a brief greeting, I cut to the chase. I want to know more about the gear, and shoved my coffee out the way so I could spread out the topographical map on the table between us. Then I pointed the Anza trailhead on State Route 74, 1 mile east of us. From there, I moved my finger southbound along a dashed line representing the PCT. When I hit Chihuahua, oh my goodness, this word. Chihuahua Valley Road. I thought it was Chihuahua, but I'm like, is it really Chihuahua? Chihuahua Valley Road, I stopped. Is this where you found it? Yes, Trockman confirmed. About a 4-minute walk south of that road. After I finished my brandied French toast, we left the Paradise Valley Cafe and headed to the spot where Trockman last saw Chris Sylvia's gear. Once we were in the vicinity, we consulted a color copy of the photo he'd taken that I printed out and brought along until we located a unique rock verifying the exact location across the trail. I noticed a small cross constructed from reclaimed wood and rusty nails. The unnamed rust memorial had since collapsed. I picked it up and hammered it back into the ground with a stone. Our experience as through hikers led Trockman and me to the same conclusion. The Sylvia gear site was not a camping spot, with its lack of shade, rocky surface, and awkward angle. It wasn't even a tempting location for a long break. What the site did offer, however, was an advantageous view of Chihuahua Valley Road. You could watch a vehicle coming from a mile or more away and have time to trot back to the trail before the car passed. Even so, this hitchhiking method would test one's patience. We only saw one other car on that road the entire time we were there. We climbed a hill behind the gear site to check for cell service. To our east, the Anza Barago Desert stretched out below the PCT, which meandered high above ridges covered the shrubs typical of California, chaparral. A semi-arid landscape of chemis and manzita that grow thick and scratchy but rarely higher than your head. At the top, we could see for miles in every direction. The PCT was identifiable The PCT was identifiable as was Chihuahua Valley Road and other landmarks. Unable to find cell service, we reconnected with the trail and hiked south. A 5-minute walk from the gear site brought us to a handmade sign welcoming hikers to a hostel known as Mike's Place. Years ago, Mike Herrera bought a patch of land on an isolated ridge east of the PCT and bought himself a man cave getaway. A big fan of the trail and its hikers, Herrera invited the travelers to fill up their canteens from a water tank on his property. He also encouraged them to camp on his home site. This act of charity had earned Mike the title of Trail Angel, a generous person who supports a thru hiker's journey in various ways, such as giving them free rides, food, or lodging. Up to 100 backpackers visited his hostel each day during peak hiking season. To handle the demand, Herrera had hired caretakers to live at his compound. His hospitality was genuine, but his hostel had a mixed reputation, causing some to avoid it. As one hiker told me, "I don't stop at Mike's, it's too much of a party atmosphere." At the sign, we turned off the PCT and continued to the compound past the metal water tank. Red plastic cups in the bushes hinted at the vibe. Part desert rat, part rowdy frat house. On the back patio of the ranch-style home, the caretaker, a guy in his 30s with a shaved head and a bushy goatee, catered to the 3 young women through hiking south. When Eric and I joined them, the caretaker greeted us. "What brings the 2 of you here?" It was apparent by our gear, or lack thereof, that we weren't through hiking. "I am looking into the case of the young man who went missing from the trail near here," I answered. "Do you know anything about it?" And what do you know about it? The caretaker's hostility made me flinch. I am working with the family and I know his gear was found less than 10-minute walk from here. He didn't make it here. The abrupt certainty of this statement made me apprehensive. To soften the tension, I introduced myself and mentioned Chris Sylvia's family will be grateful for any help he could provide. The caretaker identified himself as Josh McCoy. When I asked to see the 2015 trail register, a logbook in which the hikers use whenever they pass through, McCoy got up from his plastic chair, pulled a dusty composition notebook from an outdoor shelf, and handed it to me. This register begins in April, I said, flipping through the pages. I need to see the one from February and March. Are any pages torn out of it? Again, McCoy's tone seemed to be accusing me of something. Dang, this guy is as suspicious of me as I am of him. No, it's intact. There must be an earlier one. McCoy denied there was any more trail registers for 2015. I doubted this, but by prying information out of Miss McCoy was like shucking oysters with a nail file. Everything came out in sharp bits. Apparently, Chris's toiletries had not been in the pack. Mountain lions had been heard howling right around the same time he disappeared. Search and rescue had based their operations at Mike's place. The scent dogs had searched everywhere. McCoy himself had checked every nook and cranny, but the only thing he found was a blue denim jacket with a fake wool liner. I made note of his description of the jacket, but I believe McCoy had more info than he had to give. You must know this area better than anyone, I said. Do you have a theory? Obviously, a scenario came to mind. But before he could utter it, McCoy pressed his lips together, effectively clamping his mouth shut. With body language so startlingly closed off, this guy seemed increasingly dubious. At the same moment, some new visitors arrived, and McCoy left us alone on the porch to greet them. While Trockman distracted the female through hikers with small talk, I walked over to where McCoy had retrieved the trail register, pulled out all the notebooks, and scanned the dates. I knew it. There was a register with entry dates in late February and early March of 2015. I snapped pictures of those pages with my cell phone and quietly returned the notebooks to the shelf. We left soon after. On the drive back to Trockman's car, I asked him what he thought about my exchange with the caretaker. I'd been too direct in my questioning, he said, but that guy was definitely hiding something. Back at my rental cabin in Warner Springs, I muled over the day's events. Perhaps McCoy had sensed the authoritative park ranger that would forever be a part of me. That's what the encounter with him had felt like. All those times I stood in front of some sketchy-looking dude who would rather chew nails than talk to a woman in uniform. But on the trail, perhaps more than anywhere, appearances can be deceiving. That's a term seasoned trail expert use, hiker trash, that refers to how the uninitiated often confuse weather-beaten, disheveled, skinny as a rail-through hikers with more worrisome types like ne'er-do-wells, escaped convicts, and meth addicts. It's a taxonomic challenge, not unlike separating a poisonous mushroom from a batch of edible ones. But as experienced hikers will tell you, tiny details can help you distinguish friend from foe on the trail. Here's a hint. Pay close attention to the things that they carry. Needing an unbiased sounding board for my theories, I called my husband, a former Secret Service agent who was now a special agent in charge for the United States Forest Service. I met Kent Dilbone in 1993, back when we were both law enforcement rangers at Yosemite. Working together had stoked our early romance, but Kent was now holed up at our Denver apartment while I was out alone in the backiest backwoods of Southern California. Always the more sensible one, Kent reminded me there was no cell service at Mike's place. Returning to a remote locale to interrogate a potential suspect without backup could be dangerous, he warned. Like Clara startling down the basement dangerous? I joked. Exactly. But my husband knew better than to talk me out of going back. I had promised Chris's mother I'd get her some answers, and I couldn't stand not knowing what made McCoy clam up. I sighed. On this case, I need to think less like a cop and more like a hiker. The next morning, I stopped at a local grocery store on the way to Mike's place when I purchased a case of beer, some Red Bull, Oreo cookies, a huge jar of peanuts, and a bottle of Jack Daniels. Fresh whiskey. It was 10:30 a.m. when I arrived at the remote outpost and knocked on the back door. Twice. No answer. I peered through a dirty window and detected no movement within the shadowy interior, so I poked around the compound instead. About 50 yards from the house sat an ancient wood shack and two dilapidated RVs only a cold, wet-through hiker or the Unabomber wouldn't mind calling home. I explored the campers looking for clues or some flash of insight and found none. I walked around to the front of the main house. A wisp of smoke rose from a metal pipe on the roof. Somebody was inside. As I stepped on the porch, I spotted a dark figure moving on the other side of the screen door. "Josh?" I called out. "It's Andrea from yesterday. I brought some trail magic," which is free food, "for the hikers." "Hi, come on in." McCoy pushed the door open with one hand, and then in the other he held a steaming beverage. "Have a seat." For a man cave in the desert, McCoy's living space was cozy. Stuffing emerged from the arms of thrift store furniture positioned to face a window with a pleasing view of the Chamis-studded ridgeline between Mike's place and the PCT. I sat down while my host threw a stick of a tiny fire burning inside a wood stove. "Can I make you a cup of tea?" he asks. "Sure. Hey, I'm sorry for bugging you, but I have a few more questions." McCoy looked me in the eye. "I want to help," he started, apologizing for yesterday. "I want the family to have closure, but I was worried our conversation would scare the lady hikers." "No problem," I said, softening. "I'm sorry too. I should have picked a better time for us to talk." McCoy's little fire warmed the fall chill, and his manner toward me felt much more like that of a gracious host, in a sweet way, not in an overly charming because I've got to win you over type of way. I felt completely safe and completely foolish for being suspicious of him. McCoy had a prickly side and, as I later learned, a deep-seated distrust of authority. But I now understood why many thru hikers enjoyed this cluttered retreat managed by trail angels in the rough. Once the mood had eased a bit, I laid out on McCoy's coffee table a trail map, some photographs, and my notebook. I then showed him a picture on my phone that I pulled off of Chris Sylvia's Facebook page. In it, Chris wore a brown fleece hoodie with fake wool lining. Was this coat McCoy found at the bottom of a dry waterfall? Nope, it was definitely a blue denim jacket. Remembering our tense encounter the day before, I pressed McCoy to tell me why he was so certain Chris hadn't stopped at Mike's place. He admitted that he couldn't have known for sure if Chris visited in February 2015 because he didn't start work at Mike's until months later. Next, we talked theories. Maybe Chris walked off the trail despondent over his breakup with Elizabeth Hennell, or he skipped town and flew to Costa Rica. Perhaps while looking for a water or a cell signal, he got lost and fell or died of exposure, or because his toiletries were rumored not to have been found in his pack, a mountain lion attacked him while he was relieving himself. Hey, maybe he joined a cult. Yeah, right. We both laughed at that idea. Then McCoy offered another idea, one so real and scary had made him clamp his lips shut yesterday to avoid frightening the lady hikers. Now that it was only the two of us, McCoy confided in me. The sunny skies and isolation along this section of the PCT had attracted a specific category of entrepreneur, guys who grew illicit crops and had business practices that often turned violent. I assured McCoy I'd look into it. McCoy welcomed me to stay at Mike's place for as long as I liked, but I was eager to search some before it got dark. McCoy unloaded my bribe, trail magic, from a rental Jeep. The hikers are going to love this, he smiled, eyeing the beer. Back at the Sylvia gear site, I studied a ridge of the south, an enticement for further exploration, but once I stepped off trail to ascend the rocky slope, the thick brush fought back. I've endured enough cross-country travel through a variety of landscapes, vegetation, and weather conditions to have a sense of scale on the matter. Walking uphill through the scrub to peak under dozens of granite boulders ranks 7 out of 10 in terms of painful aggravation. What kind of person would spend more than 15 minutes pushing through the brittle chamise and eye-poking scrubs to reach the top of this ridge? An escaped fugitive trying to avoid cops and hounds? Possibly. A suicidal person looking for a cliff? I doubted it. A bored young man wanting to pass time while waiting for a ride? No way. Pushing through the brush on these ridges was so horrendous, I conclude that neither mountain lion nor maniac could drag a hiker's body 10 yards through this crowd without leaving behind a boatload of evidence. I punished myself for over an hour before deciding to search elsewhere. I drove down and park where the drainage hit the road. A mile walk up the dry creek brought me underneath the trail where Eric Trockman had spotted Chris's gear. Drainages have a way of collecting our debris, but this one was nearly pristine. I saw no sign of human existence, other than a few rusty parts from an ancient power line and a shiny Mylar balloon that had floated in from who knows where. That evening, I returned to my one-room rental cabin in Warner Springs, poured myself a glass of California Red, purchased at the only store in town, a local Quick Mart, gas station, and opened my laptop. Part of my process in attempting to track down Chris Sylvia was to study similar cases, try to find patterns and overlaps. The circumstances behind Louise Teagarden's disappearance in the late 1950s and the delayed recovery of her remains seem relevant because she was also missing from the PCT corridor, approximately 10 trail miles north from where Chris began his hike. Although it took 30 years for hikers to stumble upon her body, I imagined I'd do a quicker job of finding Chris. During my time with the NPS, I had taken part in a variety of search operations, searches for the lost hikers, downed aircraft, flash flood victims, swimmers who went underwater, homicidal fugitives from justice, and suicidal subjects. Some of these people were located days, weeks, or months after they disappeared. A few were found by accident, but every case I worked was eventually resolved. As a professional searcher, I was taught to view a missing hiker case as a classic mystery in which we must look for clues as earnestly as we search for our subject. Because people do not disappear into thin air. Something is left behind. We sometimes just have to work harder to find it. Or so I believed. In Managing the Lost Person Incident, a reference text from search professionals published by the National Association for Search and Rescue, a lost person is defined as a known individual in an unknown location, whose safety may be threatened. Typically, at the beginning of a search, a missing person's identity is known, but their personality and habits might not be. That's why in a well-managed search effort, someone is assigned the role of investigator, and the search investigator's first duty is to interview friends, relatives, and peers of the lost person. While gathering information for our subject profile, the investigator develops a deeper understanding of the missing individual, and, at least in theory, this helps us predict their behavior so that we can best determine where to search for them. While researching other missing hiker cases for clues that might help me find Chris, two disappearances grabbed my attention: Chris Fowler and David O'Sullivan, the other men who had vanished from the PCT shortly after Chris. As I dove into the reports of their last known whereabouts, the mysterious circumstance surrounding their cases took hold of me. It was nearly midnight by the time I closed my laptop and slid into the warm bed inside my Warner Springs cabin. Above me, the blades of a ceiling fan whooshed, spinning around and around like my thoughts as I ruminated over all three of the PCT missing. What on earth had they been doing? And what in the heck were they thinking before they went off everyone's radar? And that's it for this story. There might be a few more parts to this. No, there's not. She has one story, and this is this story, and that this is a true documentary crime. But that's all that she gives. More information on her, though. She wrote a really amazing story, a really amazing article, so I do want to give a quick shout out to Andrea Langford. Andrea Langford is the author of Ranger, Confidential, and 3 Trail Guides. During her career with the National Park Service, Andrea won several awards for her criminal investigations. After leaving the Ranger ranks, the accomplished outdoorswoman thru-hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, kayaked from Miami to Key West, and she and her friend Beth Overton were the first to mountain bike the 800-mile Arizona Trail. Andrea is now a registered nurse living in Northern California. But this is nuts. But this is excerpt from The Trail of the Lost: The Relentless Search to Bring Home the Missing Hikers of the Pacific Crest Trail by Andrea Langford. Now that book is available, but this is just part of it. We still have the open-ended response to know what actually happened to these people and where they went, these 3 missing along the PCT. Well, I think that's going to sum it up for today's episode here at the Chilling Ice Cold Crime Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you want to check out our Twitter page, please do. Check out our Twitter/X account at the username of Ice Cold Crime Pod. Again, our Twitter/X username is Ice Cold Crime Pod. Check us out over there, and thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. I will see you in our next episode. Crimes are committed every day all across the globe. This was just a few of them. There is millions and trillions more all across the globe. The real question is, will you return for the next episode to hear more of chilling ice cold crime? I'm your host, Austin, and there is new episodes coming every week, sometimes more than once a week, so you can get more stories and more crime to ring your ears off. Hey! Ice cold stories of pure, true crime. Only here at Chilling Ice Cold Crime.